Hello, my loves. Dijana here from Dijana.org. Welcome to episode 17 of Nova Wholistic. This wonderful podcast where my heart opens and I welcome these beautiful people to come and have a conversation with me about their lives, about their story, and about how they basically engage with the world around them in a sort of holistic way. So before we start and I introduce Lillian, I just want to encourage you to go to my website, Dijana.org, where you will be able to find out a little bit more about me, have a look at all the prior podcasts that the prior 16 episodes that have already aired and streamed. Have a look at some of the counseling and mentoring programs that I have available for you, where you also can learn how to better implement and integrate some holistic strategies into your life so that you can live a more peaceful, more authentic, more joyous everyday life for yourself, for your work, your family, your loved ones. Okay, on that note, let me now introduce you to lovely Lillian Brummet from Brummet Media. Hello, my darling. Welcome to Nova, episode 17. Woohoo!
That's fantastic. I've been really enjoying your program, listening to it as a listener, and I really appreciate the angle that you come from. It with such an honest and organic way, and it just feels like you're part of. Like you're sitting down having tea with everyone that's in the conversation. It just feels so relaxed. I've been really enjoying it. So kudos to you for that, Deanna.
Thank you, Lillian. I really appreciate that. That's lovely testimonialism.
From a listener point of view, yes.
I really appreciate it. And on that, so let's you and I have a little bit of a chat. I'm interested in who you are, not just your roles in life, but who are you? Like, what kind of music do you like? What's your favorite color? Who are you? What was your journey? So I want to give you the floor and let you kind of bring to this conversation whatever sort of in your heart in this moment to share with us.
Okay. Well, when it comes to music, there isn't much that I don't like. I'm not a huge fan of opera, but I like the music of opera. So take out the singing, I'm good to go with the opera. And I'm
Okay.
not a huge fan of rap. I'm just not. I know that it's
Mhm.
very big and it's growing and it's got a huge following and a movement, but for myself, it just doesn't, ring with me. But pretty much everything else I listen to on a regular basis, quite literally throughout the day. Um, so if I'm doing writing in my office, I'm probably going to be listening to more ambient type music, where those mixes they have on the YouTubes and other places where it's for studying or for focus and that type of music. So I'll put that on, and it really puts me in the mode of concentrating on what's going on in my office and not getting distracted by the chair dancing and the lyrics and other things, right? So I can just focus. It doesn't distract me from what I'm doing. It also calms the dogs down like incredibly. I turn that music on, boom, they lay down, they're ready to go down for a nap. It's like really
Wow.
amazing the effect that it has on them. When it
Mhm.
comes to like joyful music, energetic music, even when I'm doing yoga, I like to work out to like blues, blues rock, blues jazz, any of those types of mixes, blues country. I really like that kind of stuff. Up,
Mhm.
up, uplifting type of blues.
Mm-hmm.
I same with country. I can really get into the uplifting type of country, but not the stuff that brings you down. I try to stay away from that, just to sort of
Mm-hmm.
protect my own world. So when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to music, that's kind of where I am. I love classical. I pretty much listen to everything. My husband, being a drummer, he's got his studio in the lower half of our home, and people always ask me, doesn't that drive you crazy? Don't you get bothered by all the drumming between all the lessons and his practices and, all this,
Mm-hmm.
friends coming over for jams and whatever. And actually, it's very rare that ever bothers me. There's once in a while where I'm like, gee, I wish it was more of a quieter day or a quieter night. But most of the time, I don't mind it at all. In fact, when Dave is giving lessons or workshops or he's just practicing by himself, I calms me down, and I often go to sleep to it, believe it or not. I'll actually lay down and I'll have a real solid heavy duty nap when this is going on. And I know people are like, how can that be? But it is. It's just something that drums do to me. Yeah.
Question. Something that drums do to you. It's not the
Yes.
drummers, it's the drums.
It's the drums. That's right. Yeah.
So what do you think that's about? I mean, immediately as you talked about that, I can actually I made a correlation within my mind about what that could be, but I'm curious to see, why do you think that that's the case?
Honestly, I think, well, I've always been really pulled to music, um, and I think that drums in particular have this connection with human beings. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just the heartbeat thing, but I think it goes back to like our ancestry, and it is the basis for
Mm.
most music. Most, not all. It is the basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing that is the driving force. It's a thing that keeps all the musicians together at the same moment. It predicts the mood. It allows room for the other musicians to show their stuff, and yet keeps everything steady, keeps everything moving. It's the driving force. It's kind of like the conductor of the train in a way. And I don't think much would
Mm.
be possible without it. So I do feel it's like a really important instrument, and all percussion, all drums. And for myself, I think it's just really calming. Like
Mm.
I like disappearing into it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
because my mind is so darn busy, it doesn't like to shut off.
Yeah.
And if I have something like that going on in the background, I can my mind will let go, and I can separate self from the to-do list and the office and everything else that's going on in my cycling brain.
That's really, really so interesting, because when you were talking about it, I immediately had this, like this perception, this image of, a child in utero and the heartbeat. I saw that. And then when you said the tribal, aspect, and how that brings the tribe together, and ancestral energy, and I'm like, yeah, totally. I guess I've never considered um, what drums mean from that um, band perspective, because I've never been in a band. I mean, I don't know it to that depth.
Mhm.
I'm not connected to it at that level. Um, but I love, love, love that you know about yourself. You have the awareness that it helps you step away from the to-do list, and it gives your body a chance to reconcile. Perhaps today was kind of what I heard you say in between, kind of the lines, so to speak. um yeah, just step away and relax, and gives you a different focus, and allows your body, or the rest of you, then to kind of exhale a little bit.
That's exactly true. I mean, there's something about music in particular, like
Mm.
just music, the healing power of music, the
Mm.
tones, how that affects our brains. And there's all kinds of like university level studies on this that, where they can prove that this definitely changes our brain. It heals our brain.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
use it in all different kinds of therapy, from Alzheimer's to, concentration, people with problems with concentration, all kinds of things they use it for. My husband, being a drum teacher, he sees how it affects his students and the incredible joy that they get. And when you're listening to music, and I'm sure your listeners have heard this before, your brain just starts firing up, right? They tell you, play a lot of classical music when you have children or when you're
Yes.
pregnant, all that, right? And
Yes.
it's
Yep.
it's that whole brain development thing, right? And it just gets your brain just firing. Like when you can see it on a screen, you would just see everything light up. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're playing the whole brain just turns into a light bulb. Like there isn't an area that isn't affected when you're actually playing an instrument. And so
Wow.
like it really heals the brain. It really works the brain. And I think because you're concentrating, like there's so much you're concentrating on when you watch, here I go off onto music. But like say if I'm participating in a workshop, I don't teach, I'm not a musician, but every once in a while I'll join into a workshop as a participant. And there's a few things that I notice. I notice that you're separating from self. Yourself is playing, but then there's this other part of yourself, because your consciousness starts becoming aware of how the sounds are combining into a whole new
Mm-hmm.
sound from all these players. You're hearing
Mm-hmm.
all the individuals, but you're also hearing what you're putting together. And then you hear, oh, now this is space for somebody else to take over and maybe have a part. And so the whole room just organically feels that, and it opens up, and this person has a part, and then they close, and somebody else gets to have their part, and then they close, and it sort of flows around the room this way. And somehow intuitively you're all feeling that, you're listening to each other, you're giving each other space and room to communicate in this way. And it's just a phenomenal experience. You come out of it like a high. You have a high when you come out of a workshop like that, an emotional sort of boost, and you just energized from it.
All the good chemicals have flooded the body from all that lighting
Right.
up and transmitting. I mean, so like as you're telling this story, right? This is why I love this, doing this podcast, right? You're telling this story, and as you're telling it, right, you're transmitting a vibration, and I'm on the other side of the world, but I can feel this extraordinary energy coming from you as you're talking
Oh,
about something that you're really passionate about. And then as you're using your words to describe your state of being in that moment, right? Those words then inspire, for me, because I'm really visual, pictures of different, how the brain's lighting up, how the heart chakra's opened, how the
yes.
body's moving, and everything is working in flow and in alignment. And that is from, from my training, my experience, everything that I know, it's that perfect highest potential of any human being in one moment. Now, it doesn't just come from music, but you've just described one of the ways in which that can happen. And I
Yes.
really, really love that so much. And I'm so grateful that you just like went right for the killer story.
Yeah, I don't know how we ended up going there, but there we were. Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so good. That's so good. It
Great.
is. And so here's what I want to highlight with this, and it's a huge part of my work that I do every day with clients, etc.
Mhm.
So I don't mean to take it away from you, but I
Mhm.
just want to infuse the conversation, just add this little thing to the conversation. This potential is not possible when we spend a lot of our time in the past,
Mm.
or we're forever thinking about the future. This only happens in the flow of the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, and, you know, those words are perhaps said too much. People can recite this sort of stuff, but to actually have the conscious experience of this, the
Mm-hmm.
way you describe it, is where the power lies. Because then this moment, Lillian, that you and I have just exchanged amplifies immeasurably and is then sent out into the universe with this really beautiful, you know, loving, joyous energy in the flow. And it's this sort of stuff that makes a difference in the world, right? I don't mean to romanticize this, but I just really want to give it, like, I really want to give it like little thing. Like when people talk about little things make a difference, well, this is what that looks like.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, I would really recommend it for anyone that's suffering from feeling overwhelmed in life or underwhelmed by what they're seeing, what they're perceiving the results are from their efforts, or maybe they're just feeling really stressed with everything that's been going on in the world and how it's affected their personal situation. We are all there. And in fact, I've been there multiple times, and recently
Yeah.
a person can get really down and really depressed when you think about the things that aren't going right in your life. And also when you're thinking, as you say, too much in the future, stressing out about retirement, or you're beating yourself up about the past, or not able to let go or heal a wound from the past. And those things just haunt you. And when you get into those low points, up they come again. And I find it too, like, even though I think, okay, well, I've done some healing and stuff, I've been reminded myself, especially recently, where I've hit some real down points. Like, I've had some levels where I didn't want to go. I try to keep myself positive, but I was hitting levels that were pretty low for a while there.
Yeah.
And I was reminded yet again in a recent conversation where it came up where, yes, we need to, like, let go of things we can't control. Stop worrying and fussing about how someone might feel about this or that. Spending a little bit more attention and awareness on the moment, the now, finding that joy and letting go of things that are piling on the stress, because going over it and over something that you can't change, at least at this moment in time, then you're like a hamster in the wheel. You're not going anywhere, but you're exhausting yourself, and it's really harmful to yourself. And so, yeah, I've been reminded of that myself.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, the thing about life is that the present moment is always going to bring one thing or another, and then it could be great one minute, and then it could just be, it's really crap the next, or one day's great, or one week's great, and then the next not so much, or whatever. But this is why being aware of what brings us that thing, what's the, I'm just going to go Aussie on you here. What's the shit? Like what's the sweet spot?
Right. Yeah.
That for
Joseph
each
Campbell
person.
calls it bliss,
Yeah.
right? What's
Yes.
your bliss? So
Yeah. What's
whatever
your
word you
bliss?
called
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And it could be more than one thing, but
Yep.
just having that in the toolbox and then understanding how important it is. And this is where self-love, that good old nugget, comes in when, we notice that, okay, I'm not exactly like woohoo vibing today. Is it because I need to deal with something? Am I procrastinating? Is it something's not right? Or is it something's coming up? I need to acknowledge something? Or is it just, I just need to go and engage with a little bit more of my bliss, love myself a little bit today, put my energy into me as opposed to into external things, and
Yes.
then see what happens.
And it's not so easy when you're an entrepreneur. And if you're an
Oh my
entrepreneur
God,
who
it's
is
so not.
also an artist, oh my goodness, you take it to the level of being an entrepreneur. also an artist, and then working with your spouse. So the office never goes away when you have a home office. Your home studio never goes away. And so you have to, you know it, right? You have to like schedule that time off. You have to schedule that time for yourself. And one way that I describe it when I'm talking about this is like we all are carrying around our own trailer behind us, this garbage truck trailer, you know, and sometimes that thing can get overflowing. And if we're not careful, it can inadvertently, without intent, start spilling over and maybe leaving a mess behind us. And maybe somebody else has to clean up that mess. Maybe it falls on someone else and we don't mean it to, but there it is, right? So that happens. And especially as an entrepreneur, you know, oh, my computer wasn't working today and I had trouble with the program and I had to reload it and interrupted my whole morning and I was behind on everything. And oh, I have all these things to do. And, you know, my action plan has me doing these things and I feel like I'm behind. And, you know, and then 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up because your knee is aching and you're moving. And all of a sudden the brain clicks in and you start beating yourself. Oh, well, we haven't done this yet. And all these things are still on your list. And so, you know, having that chance to like clear the mind and do these things. It could be listening to music, it could be playing music, it could be doing yoga, it could be watching TV, like whatever it is that for you is the thing that heals you. For me, it's gardening, it's writing, it's playing with the dogs, it's spending time with my husband on the deck or near water. I love to be around like rivers, lakes, like even fountains, you know, anything that has the sound of water. There's something about the introspective nature of water, the healing, the letting go that happens around water. I'm not sure why. It also drowns out like neighborhood sounds and things like that. So you feel like your own little, you know, Zen world for a little while. I love those moments. You know, I live for those moments. And then, you know, life has to happen in between that. But I find that I cherish gardening. I go out there and to me it's therapy. I don't like to be interrupted. I want to be out there in my meditative moment, just me and the dogs pulling weeds and playing in the dirt, you know, and watching things grow, being a part of the system. You see all these, you know, butterflies and bees and birds and all these interactions of life. And I don't know, there's something about I've read somewhere that there's like a chemical that gets released when your body touches soil. And so I'm not sure if it's in the soil itself or if it's something that happens inside your body, but I remember reading something about that connectivity that we have with the soil. It's such a healing thing to do. And if you can get out there and get some sunshine and get out of the office for even a few minutes, it really is. It's really something I find helpful.
Yes. Yeah, that's really great. And yeah, that's really amazing. I'm going to, in a second, ask you a little bit more about the gardening thing, because you've written some books about gardening, or you have, haven't you?
Well, yes. Yes. So there's a story there. So it kind of goes back to when I was running a talk radio show. I ran it for about 10 or 12 or some odd years. I can't remember exactly how long. And in part of that, I was doing like a Sunday gardening segment. Every Sunday, I would answer listeners' questions. I would feature people in the know. We would have conversations about gardening, or I would just be there myself talking about what are the chores are this time of year, and you know, these kinds of things, little tips and stuff. And that, along with my mother, who was a master gardener, she and I bonded over gardening. Her and I didn't get along. I was on my own really young, all us kids were. So we didn't really know each other very well. But as a young adult, when I was becoming more of a friend and a caregiver for them, my parents, the gardening is what we bonded over, what we could talk about. It was safe territory, and it was something we were both grew passionate about. And so there is an element of her in all of that. Our cookbook came about from One Small Garden, encourages people to utilize a harvest from their local food producers or from their own garden.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then following that, coming up next year, we do have a garden book coming out. And that is like kind of like a sister book to the cookbook. And it's going to be called, I think, From One Small Yard. The title might change. And there we're talking about how you can grow in any small space. And we're going to
Mhm.
walk them through the step by step. Here's some of the chores you can expect on an annual basis, so that you don't have to go hunting around and what do I do in the first week of June? What are some of the things that I could consider doing? You don't obviously have to do them all. And it'll give you some things, give you an idea, I guess, step-by-step guide how to go
I
about doing
love
this.
that.
Thank you.
I love that. That's really cool because that's some of the I've found. I mean, I've tried to grow. Um, I actually really love. I grew up. So I live in Sydney now, but I grew
Okay.
up in Eastern Europe, and I grew up on a property. So we grew. I grew up. I mean, we grew everything ourselves, right? We had our own animals. We had our own, cherry trees and our own everything, right? So I grew up that way.
Nice.
And I really love doing it and have missed it living in the big city, right?
Mm.
And I've tried a couple of times to grow things here and there. But what I
Mhm.
find is that the European climate and the way I know how to do things just doesn't work in the Australian climate. It's too hot, it's too
Right.
humid. So invariably, everything just ends up burning. And like, I think I've got my seasons wrong. And I just,
Okay.
but
So I can give you a couple tips there actually right here, right now. So,
okay, all right, let's
okay.
do
So
that.
when you have a potted plant on your deck, patio, step, or in your yard,
Hmm.
what you want to do is make sure that that pot is really well lined with something very absorbent. There's a couple of materials that you can use. Um, what I used for my potted peppers that I did, Dave and I did a line of potted peppers alongside our house. It gets really hot there. And so those pots, they could dry out really quickly, black pots.
Hmm.
So we stuffed on the bottom of those pots a thick layer of leaves, and it took almost an entire bag of leaves per pot because we pushed it down so far, wet it a little bit, push it down. And so it becomes like this really tightly packed, maybe 2-3 inch layer of leaves at the bottom of that pot. So
Hmm.
over time, what's going to happen is those leaves are going to break down and they're going to release all kinds of wonderful nutrients. But in the meantime,
Right.
they're going to
Hmm.
act like this sponge and they're going to collect all that water that is coming through your drip line to that pot, and
Hmm.
it's going to collect it. Make sure you have a drip tray to collect any of the excess water. And another thing that is really helpful is to take some of your like grass trimmings or someone else's and dry them so they turn brown. Take that brown grass and layer it on the top of your pots. It's going to actually act like mulch. You can do this in your garden beds too. It's really helpful for keeping the weeds down, and it's fantastic for keeping the surface of the soil from drying out and be affected by the wind and the sun. Another thing that can be very, very helpful is building a really simple box, a wooden box around the outside of your pot, and make sure it's about 4 to 6 inches away from your pot. And the reason why is because it's going to create this pocket of cooler air. It'll also shade your pot. Make sure
Oh.
it's a little bit taller than the edge of your pot, maybe 1.5 inches taller than the edge of your pot. And that will keep it from the top from drying out of your pot, and it'll also shade your pot from direct contact with the sun. Those are some ways that I've used for areas that are really exposed to the sun in peak summer. It's a great way of keeping, like, we didn't have any troubles with our pots at all. If you don't have leaves, you can also use like shredded cardboard. Make sure the shredded cardboard has been soaked in like a pot of like a your cleaning bucket of water. Let it soak in there so it almost becomes like a paper mache sort of nice and soft, and then you stuff it in those pots just before you put the soil in. Don't let it dry out, and that'll become a sponge. There's an alternative as well for anyone that doesn't have access to those materials at that moment in time, but they still need to pot up that plant. Grab a couple of sponges, those ones you use to clean your dishes, or you can get them at a dollar store for a pack of real cheap. Put those in the bottom of the pot, and those, of course, being sponges, will also absorb the water and will really help your plants deal with that really hot heat.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've written my notes.
Great. Great. That's super.
Like, seriously, I'm like, this is really good. Thank you.
You're
So,
very welcome.
when's this book coming out? So we can all grab one?
Going to be coming out 2024 in the summer or fall. It's hard to predict it at this point, because right now, this summer, we're putting out a trilogy, and so we're in the last stages of that before I can get back to the gardening manuscript. So
What's a trilogy? What do you mean? What
trilogy is a set of 3 books.
Yeah, I know, but what trilogy? Like, what about?
Okay, so this is actually a collection of Dave's dad's. His father passed away in 2016. We caregived him for, I don't know, 10 years or so. And Dad had a lifetime of writing, as more when he was retired. He put out a lot more when he was retired. Through our encouragement, he joined more writing groups. He got involved with Toastmasters. He started going to open mic events and speaking out his poetry and telling his humor stories and things like that. And he put a collection together, sort of boxes and file folders and loose leaf, and little booklets that he had also put together as gifts. And so we had all of that we inherited from his estate, that he gave us the rights to, if we wanted to go ahead and publish it for him. And we decided that we were going to go ahead and do that. And that's coming out this summer. We're in the final stages. And it's really exciting for me that the first book is a collection of his poetry. The second is a collection of stories and memoirs. And so it's got like this flow from one genre to the next of his. And we're also including like photography collections, and it's going to be a mix of his lifetime of work and beautifully written stuff. Like, this is beautifully written stuff. The book that's containing the memoirs, that one, it just blows me away. There's a story about, I've told this a few times recently. There's a story about his grandmother's life. Dave's grandmother's life. So she was born in Romania in a small village. And at that time, it was very common for children of poorer families in villages to be sent away into servitude to help out their families. And so she went to a wealthier family and was helping this family manage their children. I think that was her job anyway. And so she continued doing that for quite some time. And eventually she, can't remember exactly how it happened, but she ended up finding out that Dave's grandfather needed a wife here in Canada. So she travels from Romania by train, by herself, over ocean, by train again, meets up with Dave's family, and marries this man that she hadn't met before, and takes on his stepchildren from 2 previous wives who had also passed. And so here she is, this young woman in this huge role of responsibility. And Dave's grandfather was a blacksmith. And so, hardworking family was what she moved into. And not that she wasn't used to that, but the whole journey and all her experiences as a woman at that time, as an immigrant at that time, was just an incredibly eye-opening experience for me personally. I mean, you hear about it, you read about it, you see stories on TV and in movies, but reading her personal memoir, that's going to be in this book as well, blew me away. Some of the experiences that she went through, the things that she saw, it just blew me away. And then Dave's dad, he also has a memoir in there where he speaks about, his youth growing up in the Okanagan region of BC, Canada, where Dave was also born and raised. And he speaks about like the depression, growing up through the depression, and the memories that he has of that, and just incredible stories that are so firsthand that just help me really understand the era. It made me really understand more clearly the struggles that women went through. Totally understood firsthand stories of like the depression. And it really, before, I had written a poem several years before all of this, where I talked about, our roads are golden evermore because of what our ancestors, what the people previous, what they had gone through, the struggles that they overcome. And when we look at that, our life in that light, our roads are golden evermore, was one of the lines. And after reading that series, that poem came up front to my head again. I was reminded about it. And because that's exactly how I felt after that. I just felt like, wow, so much that these people went through and struggled through and overcome. And, to allow us in this generation to have the life that we do. And hopefully we do the same. Hopefully we work just as hard for future generations, It's pretty powerful for me anyway. So I'm really excited about it coming out.
Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna we are usually in contact sort of via email
Yes.
anyway, you and I, and we communicate sort of off podcast.
Yes.
So we're gonna keep in touch. So I look forward to when that's when the book's ready, let me know, and I'll
That'd be awesome.
we'll share the love. It sounds amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've also just recently actually with my mum, we had a moment where the ancestral energy came into our conversation, and I did some research and found, and my mum shared with me some memories from when she was a child, and her grandfather was a young man, and this was at the time of World War II breaking out and the Germans coming across the borders, and how family members were, affected, and what happened when that invasion happened, and what their life was like. And I was able to, through some sort of historical society, I was able to track down some actual pictures, like some actual images of that time. And it was I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. I mean, what I carry at a cellular level as a direct result of my ancestry, and you yours, etc., how we embody that energy and what happens. And it's fascinating. B, I knew that understanding where we come from was important. But when I actually really anchored that story, and like you, as you are telling this story through the book with, Dave's family, and you being a part of that family, extended family, it really hit home how important it is to know where we come from, so that it's not
It
just
really
stories over
is.
there somewhere.
Yeah. I think for me personally, one of the reasons why it's such a powerful thing is because I don't have that. So,
Yeah.
like, my family didn't talk about things,
Right.
and I wasn't really allowed to know my grandparents, and I never knew my real father, and
Right.
I hardly knew my real mom, And so when I would get bits and pieces of stolen information, it became treasured for me.
Yeah.
I actually have an aunt Hi, Aunt Wanda, if you're watching. Who's the matriarch of the family, we call her. So she's become much closer to us since the passing of my parents, and which was 2009. And she's, purposely reached out with information. She's given me pictures of family members I've never met, never knew anything about. She's told me the few memories of stories that she remembers her parents telling her. She's shared some of those with me. I treasure those. I cling to those. I'm hungry for them. I want to know. I would love to know more. One of these days when I have copious free time, I would love to go on one of those ancestry channels,
Right.
situations, and look a little bit more into that. But I think it's so important to understand. If we understand who they are, how they became the person they are because of the experiences, then the way they went through, then we can understand our relationship with them. Even if we're looking back at a relationship that no longer exists because they've passed on now or something, we can look back up with more understanding about why they were speaking that way or what have you. And maybe we can perceive that situation in a different way, and maybe find a connection with these people. Maybe we don't agree with 3/4 of what they are, what they do, but we can find those spots, those connections, those moments. And it's so important, like, to get out there and ask those questions, especially if your parents, like, not to get dark or anything, but if your parents are heading towards the end of their life, it's a really important time to sit with them and at their bedside and start asking deep questions like, what was it like when you went to school? Who was your first love? What was your first date like? Getting them talking. Do you remember your uncle? Did you ever meet your uncle? Ask really deep questions that gets them probing their history. Maybe they don't remember some, then you start probing them, they start coming up with all these stories they didn't even know they had. And this, by recording them on tape, if you can, like on your phone or whatever, and then transcribing them or just keeping them audio, other members of the family can benefit from that. Even if you don't have kids yourself, like myself, maybe my nephews and nieces would benefit from having that kind of information, right? So you never know how that's going to impact the other people. Like, my nephews and nieces might have a better relationship with their parents if they know how their parents were raised and what they went through, instead of nobody talk about anything, nobody say anything. We're all going to protect each other from the darkness of the world, or from journeys and experiences. We're going to pretend everything's beautiful and pink and daisies, and we're not going to tell everybody what real life is like. And then the children come along and they're going, well, why is that person like that? Why do they act that way every time they see this certain situation? They have no idea, and so they make up their own stories. They have their own dialogue, and they fill in the blank themselves. And that's just such a shame when, these things are so important. They're so healing to the family. And it's just so important for us to, understand ourselves through knowing, those who came before.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right. It's like that held energy within. When it's, held within, it can create disharmony and dis-ease, which can then manifest as physical illness. So in some ways, again, going back to that health and well-being aspect, where telling stories, connecting through those common narratives, more authentic narratives, helps bring things up and out, and it's healing, it's beautiful, it's informative, it's educational, it helps brings us more into that compassionate space, rather than that egoic judgment place of shoulda, coulda, woulda. Yeah.
Or I
And
think of the stories that we tell ourselves and we begin
yes.
to believe are true, because we see something and our perspective is so narrow. and we see a glance or a look or expression on someone's face, and our head just goes, oh, well, that's obvious that they're feeling this way, and they're definitely, this is what they're thinking. And we have our own story that we tell ourselves, and they're over there thinking about how many cups they need for flour, and here we're telling ourselves this whole other dialogue, and we're hurting ourselves with that story sometimes, because that story is negative more often than not. We want to find some other story, and often we figure we're at the center of it, we're to blame, something's wrong with me, and all of these thoughts go through a person's head, especially when they're young and growing up. And, they fill those stories. We all do. We do it every minute of every day. And sometimes we have to kind of stop ourselves and realize, my perception here is really, really small. And I'm not seeing the whole picture. So try to keep those stories down to a minimum.
Now, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Can you, by the way, can I just say, I cannot believe that we're at 45 minutes already. Like, how did that happen?
Well, that's fantastic.
I can't believe it. Anyway.
45 minutes. That's quick.
Yeah. Okay, so here's my question. Okay. Well, actually, let me make an observation first. My observation is that you are really insightful. You have a beautiful sense of self-awareness. You've obviously done some work on your personal development and have this really wonderful way in which you speak and express yourself, and it's elaborate, it's informative, it's really wonderful to listen to you speak. So if you can just spend a couple of minutes maybe telling us about that journey. What is that personal development journey? How did you get to be this version of you?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm 53 now, so it's been a few years. Well, when I was very young, I really learned independence. There's a couple of things my mom did to help me with that. She instilled in her kids this sense of needing to find something constructive to do. She always used large words with us. She never talked down to us. She never talked baby talk. She always encouraged that we look things up, educate ourselves. If we had a question, there's the encyclopedia set, go look it up. Let's talk about it. She was a part of that. She would take us to libraries, and she would have us, come home with armloads of books. That's a memory I have that's quite strong, a positive memory. I went through a lot of garbage when my mom was kind of a broken person. In total, she married 5 times in her life. She had boyfriends in between. We moved all over the place, Nevada, California, BC, various places. So we were, very unstable. Sometimes we lived with her, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes I was with family, sometimes I wasn't, so you never really felt totally close, very comfortable. You never felt secure. You never felt stable. Love was a scary thing. It meant vulnerability. It meant fear. It meant pain. And so when I was on my own, which was really young, it was before I was 14, my brothers were on their own when they were 16, so it wasn't just me. But I felt kind of damaged all the time. I always felt separate, like I was observing everyone else, and then I was off to the side. And yet, I've met with people in the last 15 years or so from that era, and they said that they never felt that from me. I was always the happy, bubbly one. I was the one that people wanted to spend time with. I was the one that people would turn to when they were in trouble, needed a place to stay, any of that, And yet inside myself was a nightmare. It was like nightmare inside myself. I had troubles with insomnia. I had nightmares. I had I self-medicating. I had issues with anger. And it was anger that actually helped me into the road of self-healing. And that came from from the family's point of view, I became the black sheep. I didn't I wasn't quiet. So when things were negative and things were happening that shouldn't be happening, I would say something. So it became I was the black sheep. And
Right.
when I was on my own, even though I was paying rent, I was working full-time jobs, several different jobs in order to pay rent. And yes, I did everything I could. I cleaned out chicken sheds. I worked on the dairy farms. I cleaned houses. I did whatever I could. I worked in the onion fields. I harvested and worked with garden nursery outlets, small businesses that would hire me over the summer in the early hours of the morning, and I would come there and work for cash, clean, picking tomatoes or planting things or whatever. I was just constantly working. I was paying, I was going to school for a while, and I was still considered the black sheep. And that made me really angry. And I wanted to show them, like in this righteous sort of justification, I'm going to show them, that I can, they're not going to, I'm not that, what they say I am. And then there was a time as well where one of my abusers had caught up with me, somehow found out where I was. And he said to me along the lines of, I wasn't going to ever be able to forget him. Every time I looked in the mirror, he would be there. That he would always be a part of my existence. And that really got me mad. And I got into this, yeah, well, screw that. You're not going to be a part of my life. And so because of that anger, I actually went to the library and I scoured their shelves for every single self-help book that I could find. And I read every single one cover to cover multiple times. I took notes. I had binders of pages from notes and photocopies of what I was learning and trying to understand them, trying to understand what I was going through, trying to understand the emotions that I was having, trying to find ways of purging it and exploring it and getting some of the weight off of my chest and off of my back from what I was going through. And I think that's where it came from. Initially I was on this journey of just of fueled by rage and sort of an feeling of a justness and wanting to prove more than from I want to take care of myself because I love myself. It took a long time before I started to feel that way. One of the things that was a catalyst of that was meeting my husband. I had come out of a relationship that I had clung to because I felt like, this is love. I like the idea of being loved. And so I was more in love with the idea of being in love. And it wasn't really a very good relationship. I was young, he was young. And so I took time after that and I was thinking to myself, I gotta get to know myself. How can I trust that someone loves me if I don't know myself? So I'm putting out all these faces, these learned okay responses, these learned faces, these learned people that I had put out to the public. Everything's happy, everything's wonderful, and didn't know how to be me because I didn't know me. So I had to go through that journey, and it started right with the basics. What's my favorite color? I have no idea, so I had to explore. Do I like wearing a dress? Do I like wearing pants? I don't know. I've never thought of it. It was just, surviving, being, getting through the day, right? So I started exploring things. Does brown look good on me? Do I look good in, all the things that girls explore in their childhood and in their teenage years and things like that never crossed my mind up into 25 years, 25-year age. I met Dave in my 20s and I was on this journey. I was putting myself through college. I was looking at the possibility of going into botany. I was starting my own business, this whole era. And Dave was right there with me in that journey as a boyfriend. But he was also, in a way, my coach. He made me feel really proud of myself. He was very strong. He was like the strength that I could lean on. But he was also the person who got me to communicate verbally. So, if something was upsetting me or if I was having difficulties with something, I would bottle it up, or I would take it out on something, or I would take it out on myself, which I used to do. I would, I would leave, I would go into contemplation or depression, all of these other ways of dealing with it, but not verbally. And so he would be like, okay, well, let's talk about it, you and me, and he gave me that safe zone to be able to do that. And it's never easy for me to do that. Anything that's emotionally sensitive and in the now is very difficult for me to talk about. I'm sure it is for everyone, but I feel safer to do that because he's given me that space to do that safety, that non-judgmental, that non-constrictive. If you go this way, well, that's too far or something, right? So he would give me that room. And I think that was what I needed right when I needed it in that journey, that support that I wasn't getting from family or friends or from anywhere else. It was, he was my strength. And I kind of clung in my healing, not, I wasn't a blanket on him, a weight on him, but in my healing, I clung to that. It was like my rope. It was my healing rope to hang on to, my stabilizer as I gained some strength in my feet and my knees to hold my own. And that was really helpful for me. And so I definitely want to give him credit for that. And I think I just kept forward. I kept on moving forward, and one step at a time. You learn, you grow that, yeah, I can do this. Oh, I'm good at this. Hey, that's all right. That wasn't such a bad thing to do. You learn to step into discomfort and fear and be okay with it. We all feel it, but and sometimes it's terrifying, but to be strong enough to be vulnerable, all of that. It's been a huge, huge journey to be able to do that. Sometimes I hit a bump and I think, oh, I went back. I have to do some more healing or something. But, overall, getting there.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That was really honest and vulnerable, and I really appreciate that. And I think that it's when people share from that level of awareness is when it has the biggest impact on somebody else that might be watching this podcast. Yeah, either right now or in the future. I think it's those really vulnerable, beautiful moments. So thank you for that. That's really wonderful. And what I particularly love about what you said, I don't love that you went through that in your life, but I love how you used anger and rage to propel you forward into healing. Because
Yes.
we are so conditioned in the society that anger is so bad for you, and you must be a crazy bad person if you feel anger in any shape or form. But anger, like any, or like that inner rage, like any other emotion, which is really just that internal messenger that there's something going on inside of you, is, when used properly, can be like one of the most powerful healing forces, because it can propel you to make a change in some way.
I
Not to
never
lash
thought of it
out.
that way.
Not to
I've
lash out.
always,
That's not what I'm saying.
no,
But into
yeah.
healing,
Yeah, no,
because
I
it's
never
it's
thought
an
of it that
yeah,
way. That is
it's an
so wild, because I kept on thinking that, gee, it's too bad that that's what I had to use to move forward. And isn't it nice that now I don't need that? I have the strength to move forward myself. And I always thought of it as almost like, yeah, like it was too bad that I was feeling that way. But now that you said it that way, I understand it a little more. And I'm really glad that you said it that way.
it can be really powerful. Just
Yeah.
like fear,
Yeah.
anger, and fury, when used, in a constructive way, can really like help us move forward, even if it's I'm going to show you, you know. I'm
Right.
going to show you. You're going to see. You just wait and see.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's really amazing. I think that's really amazing, and actually something that I can relate to, because I own that about my life as well. I wasn't always there, but I had to get really pissed off in order to finally say to my life and to my codependent attachments, to my own internal narratives, as well as external, people, enough is enough. Like, I just had to get to that point. And then that created, I'm done, no more. And then I could begin to shift some things in my life. So,
Right.
yeah.
Very interesting.
No, right? Yeah, really
Right.
interesting. Okay. So,
Mm.
in closing, because we're at 1 hour now, Lillian, can you like,
That's
seriously?
crazy.
This is what happens with these really amazing conversations. It goes so quickly. It feels like 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. So in closing, your husband and you have this beautiful business called a Brummet Media. And you've already mentioned some aspects of that business. Dave's being the drumming and workshops, etc., the writing, the gardening, the 3-part memoirs, and you have an amazing and God, I'm drawing a blank. What was that? Like an interview, but it's like a written interview on
Yes, the blogs that you're referring to.
blogs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That you kindly invited me to be a part of, which I was a part of a while ago, and it's on the website as well. Please say a little bit and feature that business, and then we'll finish up the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. So it's called Brummet Media Group. Started in its early days back in mid 90s, and slowly grew into what is now known as Brummet Media Group. So that acts like an umbrella to house everything that we do, which, like you said, includes Dave's drum teaching and repair studio. It also includes our books on Amazon. There's currently 6 books on Amazon that people can check out. Just go to your local Amazon store and type in Lillian and Dave Brummet, Brummet, and you will find it, our books there. This summer,
I've actually
there's the
enclosed,
trilogy.
just to let you know, I've actually enclosed in the introduction for the the notes section of this podcast. Oh my God. I've enclosed all the links that you provided with your short bio. So it's all there anyway,
Great.
but please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. That's fantastic. So all your listeners can find it from there. And yes, we have the trilogy coming out this summer and the garden book next year. We are also managing a couple of blogs, the Brummet's Conscious blog, which, as you mentioned, does interviews with fabulous people like yourself, and all kinds of articles and quotes and resources. There's the several different series of posts that come out. Like, for instance, there's a monthly post called Just for Writers, where we're giving back to the world of writing by offering advice and resources and links and marketing opportunities, networking opportunities for other writers that we share there once a month, just packed with at least 12, sometimes dozens of resources for people. And then we have the Drummet with Brummet blog. It's kind of a sister, goes along with the studio. And we have the YouTube channel, which is Brummet Media on the YouTube, which you can find. Just do a quick search there. We have quite a few different playlists, and it's going to be growing. We have so much planned for the future. We have a 5-year plan for our business, and so we're actively working on that right now. And I'm so excited about what's coming up in the future. So I encourage people to come down to our websites on a regular basis and see what's going on. And feel free to connect with us on all those social networking sites too.
That's really amazing. Thank you. And just to add to that, just for the audience, Lillian is also a guest writer, guest blog writer on my website as well. So once a month, I think I usually do it. I add one of Lillian's blog posts onto the website and share it. So you're welcome to, check that out as well.
Fantastic.
So in other words, what we are doing, what Lily and I are doing, because we're both advocates for this, is working to create a broader community so that we have this one voice. We don't all have to, think exactly the same all the time. But I think as entrepreneurs, I think as small businesses, the power really is in unity. So we're sort of working to try and create that community feel, that more united front. Even if we have different backgrounds, even if we do different things, it doesn't matter. It's the humanity that connects us all, really. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Networking and collaborating is the only way to go. It really is. I mean, there's so much joy that can be brought from it. And, if you nurture those relationships, you can have these go back, decades. I have relationships that go back decades. And it is just so powerful how, you become more willing to help each other out and like each other's posts and comments, and then you subscribing, and now you're going to be a guest and I'm going to be a guest and someone's going to be a post, and hey, we're having a sale on the same day, let's announce that. Or there's all kinds of ways that people can collaborate and support. One of my favorite ways to do as an entrepreneur is to work with nonprofits. So I'll make connections with like community events and other activities, or nonprofits that are holding silent fundraisers or any of these types of things. Maybe they're having a conference or a board meeting. That's a great time to maybe donate your book or your gift certificate as a prize that they can give out to the people that are participating. And then you're getting all of this exposure through all of their different audience. And
thanks for the marketing idea, by the way.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's
That's
a great
so
way. It's really
great.
feel good. Like as a business, you want to make a difference to your local community. You can't always give financially, you can't always give with your time, but hey, maybe you can support in this other way. I can offer a gift prize for the people that are participating in the Santa parade. Maybe they'd like to include one of our books as a prize for the people that they're giving prizes to. So little things, you can make a difference in all kinds of different ways, and networking, collaborating can come in all different shapes and sizes.
Love it. Okay. Lillian, are you happy with our conversation today? Are we happy to close here?
I feel like we could still talk for another hour.
We could. Well, we could.
You'll have to have me back.
Yeah.
You will.
I know. There's decades yet to come. I'm 52, you're 53. We've still got time. We've got a few more decades to go.
Yeah, I plan on sticking around. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I think it's written in the stone.
Yeah.
All right, my darling, I think we're going to leave it there today.
Okay.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to say a couple of closing words and then do like a closing little video, but stick around in the studio so we can just finish, have a little chat afterwards. Okay. All right. So you just hang on there in the background. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for being part of this amazing conversation. I'm really grateful to you for being here, for watching all of this, or at least, or a part of it, if you like these podcasts. If you want to support this podcast, you can just buy me or us a coffee. The link is in the notes. I would sincerely appreciate that. And like, share, subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel. All the links are available to you. And I hope you got something really important out of this conversation, and may you have a wonderful day, wonderful present moment where you love yourself into your highest potential. And on that note, I'm going to finish, and we will see you next time. Bye.